Tonight we delve into a story that's as baffling as it is heartbreaking. A story that began with laughter and sunshine on a Caribbean cruise and spiraled into a 2-decade-long nightmare. This is the story of Amy Lynn Bradley, a vibrant young woman who in March 1998 vanished from a luxury cruise ship, seemingly into thin air, leaving behind a loving family tormented by unanswered questions and fueled by an unwavering hope. To understand the depth of this mystery, we first need to know the girl at its center, Amy Lynn Bradley. What was she like? What were her dreams? And who were the family that have tirelessly searched for her ever since? So settle in, but don't get too comfortable. This journey takes us into a fog of unanswered questions where the turquoise waters of the Caribbean hold some very dark secrets. If you are as fascinated with the hidden world of true crime as I am, then you've definitely found the right place. To join our amazing community and get new videos each week, please subscribe now. Hit that subscribe button. Also, hitting that like button down below would greatly help the channel grow and allow more people to hear these vital stories. Sharing is also encouraged, as even the smallest amount of information could be crucial. And if you want to become a more active part of this community, I'd love for you to consider becoming a channel member. You will not only help sustain the channel, but you'll also get instant access to our private Discord server. So that's where the conversation really continues, and we can have in-depth discussions about the cases I cover, share theories, and honestly just chat about life and anything else that comes to mind. It's a fantastic community of like-minded people, and I'm in there every day. So if that sounds like your kind of place, you can click the join button below this video. Amy Lynn Bradley was born on May 12th, 1974, and she grew up in Petersburg, Virginia, a place where community and family values run deep. Think of your typical American family, loving, supportive, close-knit. That was the Bradleys. Her parents, Ron and Iva Bradley, were your everyday hardworking folks. Ron was an insurance executive, a man who worked hard for his family, and Iva, a homemaker who later worked in real estate. And she provided a warm and stable environment for Amy and her younger brother, Brad. They were a family that enjoyed spending time together, creating memories, the kind of memories that would later become both a comfort and a deep source of pain. Amy was described by everyone who knew her as vibrant, athletic, and incredibly responsible. She wasn't some reckless teenager, far from it. She was a graduate of Longwood College in Farmville, Virginia, with a degree in physical education. She was a former swim team coach and a trained lifeguard, for crying out loud. This is a woman who knew how to handle herself, who understood safety. She was a talented basketball player in college, showcasing that athletic prowess. She received multiple scholarship offers after high school, and she was also described as a bit shy, but with a very sweet and kind nature. She loved music, particularly alternative rock bands like Bush, and was reportedly a huge fan of the band's lead singer, Gavin Rossdale. She had just moved into her new apartment and got a new puppy. Small, relatable details that paint a picture of a real person, not just a headline. Her brother Brad, who was 21 at the time of the cruise, shared a really close bond with his older sister. They were siblings who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. So you can imagine the dynamic, the protective older sister, the fun-loving younger brother. They were at an age where they could both be siblings and friends. Their upcoming vacation was supposed to be another happy chapter in the family's story. Amy had a life ahead of her. She was at that exciting cusp, post-college, figuring out her next steps. She was excited about starting a new job at a computer consulting firm and was thinking about her future. She had dreams. And then in the blink of an eye, on a vacation meant for relaxation and fun, those dreams were put on a horrifying hold. March 1998. The Bradley family, so Ron, Iva, Amy, and Brad, were looking forward to this week-long getaway. This was a family vacation before Amy would start back at college to get her master's degree, and just a way for the family to bond. They'd booked a cruise on the Royal Caribbean's majestic new ship, the Rhapsody of the Seas, and this was actually a gift from Ron's boss. Despite her athletic prowess and her comfort in the water, she was a lifeguard, a swim team coach, Amy had a touch of apprehension about the cruise. The vastness of the open ocean, she admitted, made her feel a little uneasy. But the chance to spend this dream vacation with her family was what drove her excitement. She packed her bags, including, as her family would later recall, around 15 rolls of film, eager to create a collage for her coffee table at home, a tangible collection of happy memories. The ship was a world in itself. Restaurants, pools, shops, and of course, the ever-present entertainment. It was a massive vessel, a floating city capable of carrying nearly 2,000 passengers and nearly 800 crew members. That's 3,000 people. Think about it. A contained environment, yet so vast. The itinerary was a dream: Aruba, Curacao, St. Martin, St. Thomas, jewels of the Caribbean. Sun-drenched beaches, turquoise waters, exotic locales, the perfect escape. For the Bradleys, it was a chance to reconnect, to enjoy each other's company away from their usual daily grind. So let's walk through their journey day by day. Saturday, March 21st, 1998, the Rhapsody of the Seas departed from San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Bradleys would have settled into their adjoining cabins on a lower deck, cabins 3048 and 3050. Amy and Brad were in one, and then Ron and Iva were in the other. There's that initial buzz of excitement that comes with any vacation, exploring the ship, perhaps a welcome buffet, the mandatory safety drill. Obviously, we don't have a minute-by-minute account of their every move these first days, and why would we? They were on a family holiday, enjoying the amenities. Amy, being the active person she was, likely explored the sports deck, maybe even hit the gym. Brad perhaps was checking out the video arcade or the pools. Ron and Iva simply soaking in the joy of being with their adult children in such a magnificent setting. The first evening would have been filled with the promise of the week ahead. Dinner in one of the grand dining rooms, perhaps a show in the theater, or maybe just enjoying the ocean breeze from their balcony. For Amy, a young woman who loved music, the ship's nightclubs and live bands would have been an attraction. Sunday, March 22nd, 1998. Sunday was likely a mix of cruising and their first port of call, Aruba. Mornings on a cruise ship are usually very busy. Everyone's at breakfast, lounging by the pool, maybe even some organized ship activities. And the Bradleys were a close family. It's easy to imagine them enjoying these simple moments together. Upon docking in Aruba, they would have had the chance to disembark the ship and explore Oranjestad, Aruba's capital, with its colorful Dutch colonial architecture, a vibrant contrast to the Virginia landscape they'd left behind. Did they go shopping? Did they sunbathe on Palm Beach or Eagle Beach? Maybe some snorkeling? These are the typical tourist activities. We know Amy loved photography. It's highly probable she had her camera with her, capturing these new sights, these family moments. Photos that would later be pored over, searching for any clue, any hint of what was to come. That evening would have seen them back on board, the ship a hive of activity, dinner, music, perhaps some dancing. Brad has mentioned that he and Amy went to the ship's nightclub on at least one of the evenings. They were young, they were on vacation, it's just what you do. The band playing in the club was called Blue Orchid. Remember that name. So I've been on 2 cruise ships, and honestly, every night of those cruises after dinner, there's not much to do when you're young. So you just go to the club and you drink. Like, that's just what we did. So it makes sense that Amy and Brad did that. There were also professional photographers on board capturing memories for passengers. The Bradleys, like many families, posed for some of these photos, smiling happily, completely unaware of the shadow looming just out of sight. Monday, March 23rd, 1998, the ship docked in Willemstad, Curacao. Now, I couldn't find this exact information, but I'm pretty sure it docked in Curacao in the nighttime. So the following day is when they would have the day to explore the island. This island has more colorful architecture, more stunning beaches, and the family were likely going to disembark again. This is where some accounts begin to hint at a subtle shift, a faint undercurrent of unease, though it's important to state that much of this is pieced together in retrospect. Ron and Iva have both stated that during the cruise, they noticed some of the ship's crew, particularly some of the waiters, paying what they felt was excess attention to Amy. Ron described it as them fawning over her. At the time, he might have brushed it off as perhaps maybe it was, overly friendly staff, or maybe just an attractive young woman drawing attention. But in the horrifying clarity of hindsight, these observations would take on a far more sinister meaning. Was Amy aware of this attention? Did it make her feel uncomfortable? We don't definitively know, but she wasn't one to make a fuss. On this night, there was a formal dinner and the Bradleys dressed up. So remember those professional photographers? Well, Amy and Brad posed for a portrait with those photographers, and usually what happens after that is that these photos are then printed out and then hung up in the lobby area, and then you can later go and look at all of them and then purchase the ones you like. So during this dinner, while Amy and Brad were off taking photos, a waiter approaches Ron and Iva at their table and then asks them where Amy is. They ask the waiter, why do you want to know? And he said, we just wanted to take Amy to Carlos and Charlie's, which was a local bar on the island of Curacao. Ron and Iva were like, weird, but Amy is with her brother. Orcs. Now, if you haven't been on a cruise before, the staff are super friendly. I think a lot of them rely on tips, and as you continue on the cruise, you form friendships with your waiters, your room housekeeper. It's usually the same staff. And at the end of the cruise, you can give them, an envelope with some money inside to thank them for their service. So that's why I feel that obviously they want to provide a good service so that they can get some tips after. That's how it was for me both times I've been on a cruise. And my parents have been on cruises like over 10 times. So it's always kind of the same thing. But off the ship, you don't hang with the crew. I remember one time we were docked in Vanuatu, and of course some crew members can leave the ships and have a look around, I guess, if they're not working. So we were at a bar and we bumped into one of our waiters from the ship. He had been our waiter every single night. And we asked him to come and have a drink with us. We were about to do a couple of shots and he refused. He said he wasn't allowed to. So Amy's waiter blatantly telling her parents that he planned to take Amy with a bunch of other waiters, by the way, to a bar off the ship definitely waves red flags to me. When Ron and Iva told Amy about the waiter asking about her, Amy responded that it was creepy. After dinner, the family went to the ship's nightclub, and the same waiter from before approached Brad and Amy and then had a conversation with them. Later, Brad recalled Amy dancing with one of the band members from Blue Orchid, a man named Alistair Douglas, who went by the stage name Yellow. He was the bass player. Iva noticed that waiter then look at Yellow and give a nod. Now, she didn't think much of it at the time, on the surface, it's just a family having fun on vacation, but this interaction would later come under scrutiny. Iva has said that Amy was a little bit down because she had recently broken up with a boyfriend back home, but she was still trying to have a good time on vacation. As Ron and Iva were preparing to leave, they told Amy and Brad not to leave the ship that night since, they were there as a family. The ship would be leaving the island the next day, and it was just best to not go out anywhere with the crew. Amy and Brad agreed and said they were just going to hang together, and their family said, "I love you, see you in the morning." Videographer Chris Fenwick was part of the ship's crew and captured candid moments of passengers and even filmed Amy dancing with a member of the Blue Orchid Band, a bassist named Alistair Douglas, who went by the nickname Yellow. Witnesses recall them drinking together, dancing together, and there was nothing overly alarming, just typical cruise ship behavior. And then again, I think he captured her as she was walking to an elevator. According to Brad, they stayed out late until 2:30 or 3 a.m., or what was now the early morning of Tuesday, March 24th, and then they went back to their cabin together. Brad went to bed. Amy reportedly said she was going to sit on the balcony for a bit and read. Their cabin 3048 had a private balcony, and this is a crucial detail. So it's now the early morning of Tuesday, March 24th, and this is the day everything changed. The day the laughter stopped and the nightmare began. Between 5:15 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. on Tuesday, Ron woke up and he went to the balcony of his cabin 3050 and he looked over the adjoining partition into the balcony of 3048 where Amy and Brad were staying. He saw Amy out there sitting in a lounge chair, apparently asleep, with her book and then also with her cigarettes and lighter beside her. He thought about waking her to come back inside, but he decided to just let her sleep, and then he went back inside his cabin. A little later, around 5:30 to 5:45 a.m., Brad woke up and he noticed Amy was not in her bed. He looked out on to the balcony and she wasn't there. So he assumed that she'd probably just gone to her parents' cabin or perhaps to get some early breakfast, and then he just went back to sleep. Around 6 a.m., Ron woke up again. He again went to the balcony and looked out onto Amy and Brad's balcony, and he saw that Amy was now gone. He was a little uneasy, but he was not yet panicking. Ron noticed that Amy's cigarettes and her lighter had gone, so he immediately went next door to his children's cabin. Brad was asleep, and Ron woke him up, asking where Amy was, and Brad was still kind of groggy. He had just only had a couple hours of sleep, and he said, "I don't know where she is. I thought she was with you." So Ron looked around the room and saw that all of her belongings were there, her shoes, her books, everything. So he thought, maybe she had gone maybe for an early morning walk, maybe she couldn't sleep. But the sliding glass to the balcony was left ajar, but Amy herself was nowhere to be found. So this is around 6 a.m., right? So Ron, he left the room. He went looking for Amy. He looked everywhere. He looked by the pools. He looked on all the decks. He looked in the restaurants. He looked in some of the bathrooms. He was like looking for her everywhere he could think of. But Amy had vanished. Panic. Pure and absolute panic. That's the only way to describe what Ron must have felt. By 7 a.m., he woke up Iva and told her that Amy was missing. She said, "What do you mean she's missing?" So they immediately searched their cabins again. They began to search nearby corridors, bathrooms, just anything around them, but nothing. After searching what must have felt like the entire ship, they alerted ship personnel. And this is where things become contentious and deeply frustrating for the Bradley family. According to Ron and Iva, their initial pleas for help were met with a disturbingly slow and dismissive response. Given the multiple eyes on Amy during their few days on the ship, they now believed that Amy had been a target. They knew that the ship was going to be opening their doors and letting passengers out onto the island of Curacao. So they asked for the ship to be moved away from the dock and not to let anyone off, for an announcement to be made for a ship-wide search to commence immediately. There were thousands of people on the boat who could help. They begged to not allow passengers to disembark the ship, fearing that if Amy had been a target, if she had been taken, docking would allow her abductors to disappear into the crowds onto the island. The family claims that the ship's officers delayed making a public announcement about Amy's disappearance for several hours. They felt that valuable time, critical time, was being lost. Think about it. Your child is missing on a massive floating city, and you feel like your concerns aren't being taken seriously enough? Imagine what that feels like. The desperation is unimaginable. If it was hard to find Amy on the ship, how hard would it be to find Amy on the entire island? But despite their pleas, the gangplanks went down, and the almost 2,000 passengers were allowed to disembark at Curacao. The Bradleys were frantic. They described a desperate, sickening feeling as they watched people leave the ship, imagining Amy perhaps being amongst them, against her will. They implored the crew to make a ship-wide announcement to search every cabin. The captain and crew offered to search the ship themselves, but nothing was found. During this time, before Amy was officially announced as missing, that bass player, Yellow, approached Brad and said, "Hey man, sorry to hear your sister is missing." Weird? Yeah, because how did he know she was missing? The only people that knew at the time was the captain and his close crew members. An announcement was eventually made, but I believe it wasn't made until after 8 a.m., by which time a significant number of passengers had already disembarked. And the announcement itself was, according to the family, very low key. It was like, "Will Amy Bradley please come to the purser's desk?" Not an urgent alert they felt that the situation demanded. A search of the ship was eventually conducted, and Royal Caribbean maintains that they conducted a thorough search. The Bradleys, however, have always questioned its thoroughness, believing it was too little, too late, and not comprehensive enough, especially in crew-only areas. They felt the cruise line was more concerned with its schedule and reputation than finding their daughter. The captain told Ron and Iva, "Well, we've searched the whole ship, and she's not here." The Bradleys begged for a photo to be circulated or another announcement to be made, a more urgent one, but the captain refused. He didn't want to disturb the other guests. He then offered the Bradleys two options. "Well, we've searched the ship, Amy's not here. So she's not on the ship, so you can either choose to stay in the ship or you can disembark here because she's not here. What do you want me to do?" The Bradley family made the difficult decision to disembark at Curacao and frantically searched for Amy on the island before the ship left Curacao. But the US embassy was closed and the FBI couldn't reach them for another 24 hours. So what did they do? Sadly, they chose to stay behind on the island of Curacao and watched their ship leave the dock, with the music blasting and the rest of the passengers having fun, having no idea that one of their own was missing. The ship left the family behind, taking along with it any potential hope of finding Amy. I mean, guys, can you believe the ship did this? I'm sure all guests would have been okay staying back on the island another 24 hours just to find a young missing woman. It's horrific. I still can't believe that that was allowed. As Ron described it, they were put off on the island of Curacao with no instructions, no real support from the cruise line, left to fend for themselves in a foreign land with their daughter missing. The family's initial search in Curacao was a desperate, heartbreaking blur. They showed Amy's photograph to anyone who would listen, taxi drivers, shopkeepers, all the locals. But the vibrant, bustling island offered no immediate trace of this missing American girl. A search of the ship was conducted by the crew as they claimed, but the Bradleys would later learn while they were on the island of Curacao, to their horror, that it wasn't a thorough cabin-by-cabin search they had envisioned. Common areas were checked, but not everywhere. So they literally just checked like all the public areas, the bathrooms, but no cabins, no crew areas. Like, what type of search was that?
And actually, there was not a thorough search on the boat. They searched the common areas, they searched the restrooms, but they did not search every nook and cranny.
So the family was like, she could still be on the ship. So I believe by the FBI's advice, the family decided to take a flight to St. Martin to catch up with the ship and then reboard. So if you didn't know, on a cruise ship, once you leave a dock and go out a few miles into the ocean, it's considered international waters with no jurisdiction. So it's essentially lawless and you have no rights. The Netherlands Antilles Coast Guard conducted a 4-day search of the surrounding waters. The FBI then became involved and boarded the ship in St. Thomas, its next port of call. And investigators interviewed passengers and crew members, and Yellow was even questioned, and he reportedly passed a polygraph test. The FBI explored various scenarios, could Amy have fallen overboard? But Amy was a trained lifeguard, and her family was adamant that she had a fear of heights, and she just wouldn't have been reckless near the railings. Moreover, searches of the ocean yielded nothing. So was it suicide? Again, her family and friends insisted that Amy was happy, excited about her future, and had no history of depression or suicidal thoughts. The FBI themselves stated they found no reason for Amy to leave her family or harm herself. Amy Lynn Bradley, a 23-year-old woman, a daughter, a sister, had simply vanished. She had left behind her shoes, her IDs, her camera, everything you'd take with you if you were just stepping out for a moment. Everything that she would have needed was still in her cabin. She hadn't packed a bag. She hadn't taken her passport. This wasn't someone who had decided to run away. She had her whole life ahead of her, a new job, a new apartment, a beloved puppy waiting for her. She'd bought souvenirs. She'd sent postcards. These just weren't the actions of someone planning to vanish. This left the most sinister possibility: abduction. Could Amy have been targeted by someone on the ship? Crew members? Fellow passengers? Could she have been lured or forced off the ship in Curacao? As word slowly began to spread, some potential sightings from that morning emerged. These sightings were both hopeful but deeply troubling. So remember Alistair Douglas Yellow, the musician from the band Blue Orchid? Well, some witnesses report he was seen with Amy in the early hours of that Tuesday morning between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. on the upper deck. They saw him hand Amy a dark-colored drink, and he was supposedly carrying her lighter and cigarettes. The passengers claimed that Yellow said something like, "She's fine, we've been up all night partying." Now, Yellow initially denied this and then reportedly admitted to partying with her, but claimed they parted ways around 1 a.m. But witnesses say he left the deck alone after 6 a.m. So this timeline ties in with Ron's last sighting of his daughter. Then the elevator sighting. So 2 passengers reportedly saw a woman matching Amy's description in one of the ship's elevators with Yellow around 5:30 a.m. They said she looked distressed, and Yellow allegedly told her, "Amy, I'm sorry, this is an unfortunate situation." And then perhaps one of the most disturbing potential sightings came up way later. A cab driver in Curacao later claimed he saw a woman matching Amy's description, frantically trying to get his attention as she was being led away by 3 men. He said she looked terrified and told him her name was Amy Bradley and that she needed help. Now, as frustrating as it is, the cab driver didn't report it at the time because he feared repercussions. This sighting, if accurate, suggests something horrific happened before she was officially noted as missing from the ship on Tuesday morning while at sea. However, the timeline here is often debated because the cab driver came forth with this information, like I believe months or a year later. So is his sighting of Amy that same night that the ship was docked at Curacao, the same night that Amy disappeared off the ship? Or even more terrifying, was it somehow a while later and Amy was brought to Curacao from a different island? So, but either way, if this sighting is accurate, Amy was in Curacao. You don't just say your name is Amy Bradley. She was not from the area. So it seems legit. And then the Bradleys clearly believe that this points to her being taken off the ship at Curacao and abducted. The official investigation began, led by the FBI, but the Bradleys quickly grew frustrated. They felt that the crucial early stages were mishandled, leads grew cold, and the vastness of the ocean, the transient nature of a cruise ship, passengers and crew members, and the passage of time all conspired against them. The family took matters into their own hands. They hired private investigators. They plastered Amy's face on posters, on the news, on billboards, and eventually on the then emerging internet. They appeared on numerous television shows, Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted, Oprah, Dr. Phil, anything to keep Amy's story in the public eye. And I believe it was on Unsolved Mysteries years ago is when I first heard about this case. They knew that public awareness was their greatest weapon. In mid-1999, one of the private investigators they hired, named Frank Jones, asked for $25,000 to travel to Curacao and bring Amy back. He believed he was able to do this as he had some information that Amy was being trafficked over there. At this point, all those leads, especially the cab driver sighting, led the Bradleys into believing that Amy was indeed being trafficked in Curacao. The Bradleys asked family and friends to raise and donate this $25,000 to bring Amy back. So once the money was raised, the PI took the $25,000 and then went to Curacao and looked for Amy. Soon, the Bradleys received a phone call. Frank had great news. He found Amy. He sent the Bradleys pictures of a woman on the beach with a man, and this woman looked like Amy, although you could only really see her from the back, but she had the same tattoos as Amy. Holy shit. Then Frank said, okay, to bring her back, we actually need more money. We need $100,000. They didn't have that. So Ron's former employer said that he would front the $100,000 since he was the one to gift them the cruise tickets. And then he actually hired a second PI to go to Curacao and help Frank Jones. Now, with two PIs on the case, the Bradleys waited in Miami for Amy's rescue. Frank waited a few more days and then finally contacted the Bradleys saying, guys, there was a gunfight and he couldn't save Amy. However, the second PI, his name was Tim, then delivered horrible news to the family. This Frank Jones was a liar. He was a con artist and used the money that the Bradleys had given him to find Amy to live it up on the beaches of Curacao. That photo of Amy, paid models. Sadly, their vulnerability made them an easy target for scammers like Frank Jones. They offered substantial rewards for any information leading to Amy's safe return. The initial reward offered by the family was $50,000, and then Royal Caribbean eventually offered a $100,000 reward, and then later the FBI added an additional $25,000 reward. So these figures have fluctuated with the family, at one point offering as much as $260,000 for any information. So let's talk about some reported sightings and some really disturbing clues. Over the years, a number of alleged sightings of Amy have surfaced, each one being a roller coaster of hope and despair for the Bradley family. Beyond the initial cab driver's story, there were other compelling and deeply disturbing reported sightings of Amy in Curacao. So in August 1998, two Canadian tourists reported seeing a woman resembling Amy on a beach in Curacao. They said she had tattoos matching Amy's. So she had a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball on her shoulder, a sun on her lower back, a gecko lizard on her navel, and a Japanese symbol on her right ankle. When they looked closer at Amy, they noticed that she was kind of signaling them, trying to get their attention, almost asking for help, but they really just weren't quite sure. When they kind of kept looking at her, two men reportedly approached them and told them to move along. And then after that, this woman didn't make any more eye contact with them. Then in January 1999, and this is the one that really gets to me, a member of the US Navy, while visiting a brothel in Curacao, claimed he encountered a woman who told him that her name was Amy Bradley and that she was being held against her will and not allowed to leave. He didn't report this immediately, fearing for his career, but later came forward. He provided details about her appearance and demeanor that the Bradleys found to be credible. I mean, but it was way too late. He came forward like a year later. The FBI investigated this lead, but it yielded no concrete results in finding Amy. But it did, however, fuel the horrifying theory that Amy had been abducted and forced into sex slavery. This is perhaps one of the most tantalizing and heartbreaking pieces of potential evidence. So in 2005, an email was sent to the Bradley family, and it contained two photographs of a woman who was scantily clad and who bore a striking resemblance to Amy. The photos appear to have been taken from an adult website, and the woman in the photo was referred to as Jas. And in the email, she looked really tired, perhaps drugged, and deeply unhappy. Forensic analysts examined the photos, and some believed it could be Amy. Others were less certain, pointing out subtle facial differences. But the origin of the photos, despite the efforts, couldn't be definitively traced. For Iva, the resemblance was strong enough to believe it was her daughter. I mean, imagine seeing those images, the desperate hope mixed with the utter revulsion and fear. The FBI investigated, but they couldn't confirm it was Amy or locate the source of the photos or the woman. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, it's not her. But to be honest, these photos really do look like Amy. And as her mother, you could imagine Iva was desperate and clinging on to any hope that Amy was alive. There was another reported sighting by a woman named Judy in Barbados in 2005. She claimed she saw Amy in a department store restroom, and she said 3 men were with her, the same information the cab driver gave, and they threatened Amy when she tried to speak to Judy. Judy said Amy's last words to her were, "My name is Amy and I'm from Virginia." Judy went to the authorities, but again, the lead didn't result in Amy being found. Each of these sightings, and many others less publicized, paints a really grim picture. They suggest that Amy might not have simply fallen overboard, as some initially theorized. And this is a theory the family has vehemently rejected, given her lifeguard training and the fact that nothing indicated an accident took place. Instead, they pointed towards a far more sinister scenario: abduction and human trafficking. The Bradley family has traveled extensively following up on leads, often at great personal expense and emotional cost. They've navigated the murky waters of international crime, dealt with individuals who may or may not have had credible information, and faced countless dead ends. But their resolve has never wavered. So what really happened to Amy Lynn Bradley? The theories are numerous, but these are a few that persist, okay? So one is an accidental fall overboard. And this is the theory that the cruise line likely preferred, and one that some investigators might have initially considered. However, as mentioned, Amy was a strong swimmer and a trained lifeguard. The railings on the ship were quite high. Her family insists that she would not have accidentally fallen, and if she had, she would have screamed or made some noise, or there would have been a sign of a struggle, something. No one reported hearing anything that morning. Plus, her belongings were left behind. Suicide? Again, highly unlikely given her personality, her future plans, and the lack of any note or indication of any severe depression. Her family has always dismissed these two theories. Voluntary disappearance. Now, the idea that she chose to run away and start a new life, this also seems improbable. She was close to her family, had a job lined up, and left all of her IDs and money behind. Why vanish in such a dramatic and mysterious way from a cruise ship in the middle of the Caribbean? Could she have been accosted, attacked, and then thrown overboard to cover up the crime? Now, this is a terrifying possibility. Abducted by crew members or passengers and smuggled off the ship? Well, this is a theory that the Bradley family and many who follow the case believe is the most plausible, especially given the attention Amy received from some of the crew members and the various reported sightings of her on the island of Curacao. I mean, Amy wasn't like a typical looking girl. She had this short hair and these green eyes, and we know that green eyes are kind of rare. So the fact that she was seen by so many people points to this theory. The silent nod that Iva saw that waiter giving to Yellow in the club, the fact that Yellow was seen with Amy so many times that night and into the early hours of the morning, just leads to the theory that she was targeted, perhaps drugged, and then covertly taken off the ship, possibly in Curacao before her disappearance was widely known, or even later in St. Martin. The alleged sightings in brothels and with handlers, those three men, just really fits this horrifying narrative. The actions of Alistair Yellow Douglas, the musician, has always been a point of focus. His initial denials of even being with her, and then his eventual admissions of being with her, and his alleged presence during some of the early morning sightings raised some serious questions. And he has reportedly cooperated with investigators to some extent, but he has never been charged in connection with Amy's disappearance. And from the videographer's footage that I saw in a documentary, he was like an older guy. So had he been doing this for a while? Why was he coming on to such a young woman? I know that's common. I know, older men are attracted to younger women, but there's something so weird about it. And then seeing Amy in that video dancing with him, I was like, why is she even dancing with him? So it just also makes me believe that she was drugged. The cruise line's initial response also remains a sore point. Did they do enough? Did they act quickly enough? Well, you and I, together with the Bradleys, feel strongly that they did not, and that critical time was lost. It's now been over 27 years since Amy Lynn Bradley vanished, more than a quarter of a century. Yet for her family, the pain, the uncertainty, the desperate hope, it all remains as fresh as it was in March 1998. Officially, Amy Lynn Bradley is still listed as a missing person. The FBI case remains open, though it's considered a cold case. From time to time, new information or a potential lead might surface, prompting, a flurry of activity, but so far none have led to Amy. The Bradley family continues their advocacy. They maintain a website and a social media presence dedicated to finding Amy. They regularly give interviews, ensuring that Amy's face and her story are just not forgotten. They know that somewhere, someone knows something. Iva, in particular, has been a fierce and tireless warrior for her daughter. Her determination is awe-inspiring. She has sifted through countless tips, endured unimaginable emotional torment with every false lead and every disturbing photograph. Yet she continues to fight for answers. Ron and Brad have stood steadfastly beside her, a family united in their grief and their quest for the truth. Over the decades, technology has advanced, and facial recognition software, DNA analysis, the internet, and social media have all become powerful tools in missing persons cases. These tools have been applied to Amy's case, but so much time has passed, it's honestly working against them. The rise of true crime podcasts, documentaries, and online communities has also brought renewed attention to Amy's case, introducing her story to a new generation. And like I said, I think I heard about this story like a decade ago. I remember maybe I was even in high school. I just remember watching it and going, what happened to Amy? This is impossible. And this public interest is vital. It keeps the pressure on, and it keeps people thinking, and it increases the chances that someone somewhere might finally come forward. While the search for Amy continues, her story has had a lasting impact. It serves as a chilling reminder of the potential dangers that can exist even in seemingly idyllic settings like a luxury cruise. It has highlighted the complexities of international investigations and the challenges families face when a loved one just disappears in a foreign jurisdiction. The Bradley family's relentless efforts have also inspired many and have undoubtedly raised awareness about human trafficking, a dark underworld that many are still unaware of. If Amy was indeed a victim of this horrific crime, her story, although so tragic, could ultimately help save others. What does the future hold for the search for Amy Lynn Bradley? No one can say for sure. Will there be a breakthrough, a deathbed confession, a chance encounter that finally cracks the case? The Bradleys live with these questions every single day for 27 years. They live with the what ifs. What if the ship had been stopped sooner? What if the initial search had been more thorough? What if those sightings had been acted on immediately? But alongside the what ifs, they also live with an unshakable love for Amy and an unwavering belief that they will one day find out what happened to her, whether she's alive or she needs rescuing, or whether they can finally bring her home for a proper goodbye. They deserve answers. Amy Lynn Bradley was 23 years old when she disappeared. She would be in her early 50s today. Her family has missed out on decades of her life, her potential marriage, her potential children, career achievements, the simple joys of birthdays and holidays together. That honestly is the true cost of this mystery. The family has always been critical of the cruise line's initial response, feeling that precious time was lost and that their concerns were just not taken seriously enough. They believe crucial opportunities to find Amy in those first few hours were missed. The cruise line, for its part, has generally maintained that they cooperated with authorities and conducted searches, but years turned into decades, and Amy's face, often shown in age-progressed images, remains on missing person databases. The FBI case is still open, the rewards are still offered, but Amy is still missing. So I wanted to check if the Bradleys sued Royal Caribbean, and they actually did. They filed 2 lawsuits against them in 1999. One was for negligence, claiming that they didn't adequately handle her disappearance appropriately and didn't provide sufficient security. And then the other was for wrongful death. But then there was no proof that Amy was actually dead. But both lawsuits were dismissed by a Miami judge in October of 2000 because they found that the Bradleys concealed information and had given false answers. So they essentially committed fraud against the court, apparently, because they didn't disclose certain sightings of her, which I'm going to look more into that because that is crazy. And this case is one where the theories continue to swirl. Was she taken by crew members who had connections on the island? Was she targeted by criminals involved in human trafficking who saw an opportunity with a young woman? Did she simply tragically fall overboard in those early morning hours, her disappearance unnoticed until it was too late? Despite her swimming abilities, and the ocean is a vast and unforgiving place, but the family has never given up hope. Ron and Iva have dedicated their lives to finding their daughter. As you can imagine, they've navigated a labyrinth of false leads, scams, and the agonizing silence of not knowing what happened to their daughter. Brad lives with the memory of their last night together and the gaping hole her absence has left. They believe Amy is alive, and they cling to that belief with every fiber of their being. The story of Amy Lynn Bradley is a chilling reminder of how quickly the ordinary can become terrifyingly extraordinary. A family vacation, a moment of distraction, a door left ajar, and a life irrevocably altered. It speaks to a parent's worst fear, the vulnerability we all feel when confronted with the unknown. It's a story of a bright light extinguished far too soon, or perhaps a light still flickering, waiting to be found. It's a story of a family's profound love and their refusal to give up hope. And it's a story that implores us all to keep our eyes open, to listen, and to remember Amy. Because somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be discovered. The turquoise waters and the sun-drenched islands of the Caribbean hold their secrets close. And for the Bradley family, the search, the hope, and the agonizing mystery endures. Perhaps someone somewhere knows something, a forgotten detail, a whispered conversation, a pang of conscience. Until then, Amy remains a beloved daughter, a cherished sister, a bright spark who vanished into the sea haze, leaving behind a void that time has not and cannot fill. So these are Amy's identifying marks. So she has a Tasmanian devil spinning a basketball on her shoulder, a Chinese symbol on her lower back, a Japanese symbol on her right ankle, and a gecko around her navel. She also has a navel ring and a scar on her left shin. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, please contact the FBI or the Bradley family through their official channels linked below. No piece of information is too small. You could hold the key to unlocking this decade-long mystery and bringing peace to a family that has suffered for far too long. If you want to keep the conversation going, definitely click join below and let's chat on Discord. I really feel that those leads, those pictures, especially this one, I think it's Amy. It just doesn't make any sense that she was thrown off the ship. Like what value does that bring to the person that did that to her? I feel like if there were that many eyes on Amy, right? Why? She was really young And perhaps she was kind of a little bit more independent and they saw like, oh, she's not actually with her family all the time. She kind of does her own thing. Maybe they thought this was an easier target to grab. So one thing that I found out that honestly makes me believe that she really was targeted, and it honestly gives me the chills thinking about it. So remember those cruise ship photographers, right? So Amy and Brad went and got their portraits taken on the night of the formal dinner night. So I believe Iva, she then goes to the photo display before Amy is known to be missing, and she attempts to buy the photos of Brad and Amy. So she goes to buy the photos, she's looking for them, and she can't see any photos of Amy or Amy and Brad. And she asks the photographer like, oh, where's the photos of Amy? And he's like, oh, like I printed out all the photos. I don't know where the photo's gone. Almost like someone else grabbed the photos. Now, what's weird to me is that you have to buy the photos. And I'm guessing in 1998, you still had to buy the photos. I don't think that they were free. So it seems like someone else took the photos of Amy. So did they steal them? Was there no like camera footage from the ship? So I feel like there were multiple kind of like signs pointing towards her being a massive target. Like maybe this was a common thing happening in a certain island, maybe Curacao, like there were certain people waiting there to sex traffic young women or whatever. I feel like there were definitely more things that could have been looked into. That's really chilling to me. Like someone has taken the photo and Amy's photos are the only ones missing, and then she ends up missing. A lot of people online are saying, no, she definitely fell overboard. There's sharks in the water. The height of the balcony to the water would have been enough to harm her. And, maybe she drowned despite, being a good swimmer. She could have been intoxicated. The ocean could have just been much more, more dangerous than she anticipated. It's in the middle of the night, things like that. But if you've ever been on a cruise ship, the balcony is quite high. And Amy does look tall, but she would have had to really been fooling around and like putting herself at risk to fall over, and if her father saw her sleeping, if she stood up and stumbled in her sleep, it doesn't seem like a very likely possibility. It seems like she would have had to like intentionally done something. The sightings of Amy are what make me feel so, so sad. Like, unless all these people are lying, how can there be that many sightings of Amy? The one with Judy in the bathroom and the cab driver, and especially the one of those 2 Canadian tourists on the beach, make me believe like she was trying. Amy had been trying to, hey, I'm Amy, I don't want to be here. And it's like nothing gets done. It's so horrific if that's what happened to Amy, if she is made to live in this torturous life, being trafficked, being used by these men that probably don't even think about the fact that, hey, she's probably here against her will. Like it just breaks my heart because that vacation was meant to be joyous and you just never think something like that is going to happen. It's still, I think, hard to fall off a cruise ship unless you're intentionally doing it. And then again, yeah, you would scream. Someone would see something. And is there no cameras on the edges and things like that? I think now there are. I don't know about 1998. But I really feel like this is such a sinister case. I feel like she was definitely targeted. She is definitely a victim. I don't think that she fell off or had an accident. And just the thought of her being out there still, if she's still alive in her 50s, which, in a way you hope that she is, but then if she's suffering, you don't want her to suffer. So if she's still out there, it's just like, I can't even imagine if she has any hope left. Let me know your thoughts on this case down below, guys. What do you guys think happened to her? And if you're on Discord, let's chat over there. This is one of those cases that I think I'm always going to think about, and especially if I ever get on a cruise ship again. So definitely let me know what you think, and I will see you in next week's video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Besitos. Bye.